I just got diagnosed with a brain tumor. Plus 8 months update. My doctor just called and told me. He says it's probably benign, but he's not sure. It looks benign in the pictures at least. He says a neurologist will contact me soon with more info. I hope soon means today or tomorrow. My wife is out shopping. She will be home in 20 minutes and then I will tell her. We have 2 boys, 9 and 11 years old. I want to tell them tonight. I don't want to hide this from them. I don't want to traumatize them, but I think they need to know. Wish me luck. Additional information from OP to his families and friends. I told my boys. We cried a bit and hugged a bit. After that we played board games and we were able to laugh and mess around like we usually do. I called my folks last night too. And my brother and then my oldest friend. My boys went to school today and life is moving on. Today I will tell my boss and the people at work. They are all awesome and every day at 10 and at 2:30 we sit in the cafeteria and just laugh about random stuff. It's the best workplace I've ever been at, but I only started working there 5 months ago. Relevant comments. OP on telling his children about his diagnosis soon as possible. OP. When I was younger my nephew lost his mom. She was sick for a year and then finally died. She was such a great person and a great mom. But the grown-ups never told us kids the truth. They always gave us an unrealistically optimistic version. So when she died, we were totally unprepared. My nephew never really recovered. When I found out that the grown-ups had been lying to protect us, I felt some resentment. But I'm not sure what is the right thing to do. I am so new to this. Maybe you are right, but I feel I must do what feels right to me. Update 1. 8 days later. Last week I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I've had my ups and downs since. Today I met with my brain surgeon for the first time and he showed me pictures of the tumor. The bad news is, it is a very large tumor, 26 millimeters in diameter. If you are American, that is about equivalent to a tablespoon. He said there were size classes where less than 10 millimeters is considered small, 10 to 25 millimeters is large and 26 to 40 millimeters is giant. So I have a giant brain tumor. The good news is it is accessible for the surgeon to remove without cutting into the brain. The surgeon expects me to make a full recovery. My brain surgery is scheduled for the beginning of May. I am so relieved that I am not going to die. But I'm still really nervous and sometimes I'm sad. Sometimes I don't know how to feel. Additional information from OP. Thanks for all your kind words. Even after receiving good news this morning I was feeling kinda down. But reading your comments really helped. Now I'm off to bed with an actual smile on my face and some warmth in my heart. I think maybe I do got this. I will update you guys hopefully with some really good news after the surgery. Relevant comments. OP on the signs of a brain tumor. OP. I have some strange vision problems. In one eye, I essentially have a blind spot near the middle of my field of view. I started really noticing last December. I saw an eye doctor who told me there was nothing wrong with me. I then saw another eye doctor who performed a field of view test. Like the first doctor, he found nothing wrong with my eyes, so he ordered a scan of my head. I was expecting to hear back that I was probably just stressed or something. OP on what his surgeon said and if he will need another surgery in the future. OP. He said he might not be able to on the first try since it is so big. I might need another surgery in 5 to 10 years. But hey, I'll take it. OP on the waiting game and how he received the news of his diagnosis. OP. Oh yes, the wait is the worst. After I got the news I was at home alone for an hour. I didn't want to tell my wife over the phone, so I had to wait for her to come home so I could tell her the news. Man, that was the longest hour of my life. OP on if the tumor is likely to be benign and if not, what the next steps were to be taken. OP doc says 99% odds that it is benign. Thanks for the support. Update 2. 3 weeks later. Hi guys, I promised an update post-surgery and here it is. My surgery was removed this morning and it went very well. Even though the surgeon had told me beforehand that everything should be fine, I had been having intrusive thoughts. I kept thinking what if this or what if that. When I lay on the bed in the operating room and they had the oxygen mask on, I was really afraid. But then the next thing I know, I am waking up in the post-op, wake-up room. In my mind I did a golf celebration, yes, still here. My vision has already cleared about 90% of the way. I will stay in the hospital for a week for monitoring, but it is all looking good. I will be just fine. I want to thank all of you who reached out. Those that shared their own experiences and also those that offered well wishes and kind words. I read every comment, and during a pretty rough time in my life, they really helped and made me feel better. I am so grateful. Relevant comments. OP on what type of tumor he had prior to the surgery. OP. Thanks, yes, it was a pituitary tumor. It was not producing prolactin, so probably adenoma rather than the other one. I am scheduled for an MRI in 6 months to see if they got it all. OP on what other symptoms he noticed and not realized that they were connected to his brain tumor. OP. It was the same for me. The tumor was putting pressure on the optic nerve, causing large blind spots in my field of view. I also had other symptoms that I had not connected the dots that they had the same cause. Headaches, nosebleeds and a constant feeling of pressure inside my head. And yes, this experience has given me so much perspective. I remember in the first few days I was sure I only had a few months left. I recall walking outside and just enjoying all the different sensations. The scent in the air, the breeze on my skin and the caw of a raven. At that moment I thought, I can't believe I've taken this for granted, and now it all just feels like a big scare. Made to remind me of what I have. Update. 8 months later. This is a pretty long one, so I decided to write it all out, just so I could kind of close this chapter and move on. My first post about this was before I even told my wife, and the comments were really helpful. So if anyone is interested in the full story, here it is. Last spring I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I had been having some annoying and unusual problems with my vision, but my eye doctor couldn't find anything wrong with my eyes. I went to a second eye doctor, but he couldn't find anything wrong with my eyes either, so he ordered a CT scan of my head just in case. I wasn't really worried and was almost positive that it was something stress-related. I'm 40 years old and people around me were all having strange stress-related issues, so it had to be that. A couple of days after my CT scan, the eye doctor called me up and told me that there was a tumor in my pituitary gland that was causing pressure to my optic nerve. He said that I would need brain surgery to remove the tumor. I started shaking. I asked him where exactly the tumor was located and if it was accessible. He said, well, actually it is in the very center of your head. These kinds of tumors are usually removed by an operation through the nose. I took the news quite hard. When he said, in the very center of your head, I took that to mean the tumor was in the very center of my brain. He didn't know much more about it, but told me that he would send a referral to the neurosurgery ward and that I would be contacted by a brain surgeon soon. I drove home trying to plan out how I would break the news to my wife and decide if and how I would tell my 2 sons aged 9 and 11. At this point I was 100% certain I was about to die. I was too afraid to Google anything since I just couldn't handle seeing the bad news I knew in my heart I would find. I sat on the couch as I waited for my wife to come home from work, trying my best not to let my sons see the tears coming from my eyes. When my wife got home I was able to fool her into joining me in taking the dog for a run to get her out of the house and away from the boys. As I was about to stop the car, she asked conversationally if I had heard back from the eye doctor. I stopped the car and told her that actually I did hear back and proceeded to tell her the news. She was devastated, of course. There was a lot of other shit going on in our lives, neither of us were prepared for this. Later that night we sat down with the boys and told them the news also. I had debated if I should tell them, but I have such a great relationship with them, I couldn't keep something like this from them. I knew they would have wanted to know, and if it turned out for the worst, it would be better to give them time to process rather than waking up one day with me gone. They were shocked initially, but all in all they handled the news well. Later that night we played board games together and were able to laugh and have fun just like we usually did. In hindsight I think they never really believed that anything terrible could happen. Kids are a bit like that. Optimists at heart. Over the next few days I told other people close to me, like my parents. Every time I tried to put as positive a spin on it as I could, even though I didn't feel it myself. Every time I was alone with nothing to occupy my time, the thoughts would come tumbling down on me. I kept thinking how unfair this was to my sons who deserved to have a normal childhood. Now I was about to royally fuck that up by dying. My cousin lost his mom when he was 11 and he never really recovered fully. Will they have to deal with that too? I started to feel like I had cancer everywhere and the brain tumor had metastasized from somewhere else. I could feel the cancer in my abdomen. I tried to tell myself that I was probably imagining things and that it was probably just something non-serious. But I was overruled by a thought saying, "That was what you thought about the vision problem, silly. No, this is serious. You are going to die." I made peace with the fact that I was dying. I hoped I would have at least 5 or 10 more years. Then I could properly prepare my boys. Just a few more years would mean so much. I started to view every day as a gift. I would revel in the small things we take for granted, like walking to work on a beautiful day. A raven cawing subtly from atop a lamppost while the breeze caressed my skin. About a week later I heard from the brain surgeon. He told me more about the surgery and he was actually able to convince me that my prognosis was in fact quite good. He said that he had performed many surgeries like that and he had a 97% survival rate with his patients. Seeing as I was young and in good shape, my chances were even better than that. He did also tell me that the tumor was quite large, almost 3 centimeters in diameter, so that worried me a little bit. He booked a date for my operation only 3 weeks later, which I was very thankful for. I will never forget the day of my surgery. I told the nurses that I was very nervous about the surgery and to please give me some really strong anti-anxiety meds. They gave me a Sobril, which did not help even a little bit. I waited in a room of people who were also on their way to surgery. Finally a nurse called my name and asked me to follow her. For some reason I thought they would make me lay down in a hospital bed and then roll me into the operating room. So I was quite surprised as I followed her through a couple of doors and found myself standing in front of the operating table and about 8 people who were there for the surgery. One of them asked me to lay down on the table, but as I did she said, "No, the other way, the pillow is for your knees, not your head." They then asked me to say my full name and asked if I knew what type of operation I was there for. I remember being very awkward when I said I was there to have a brain tumor removed. I was unprepared for the question, but I know they ask it to make sure there isn't a mix-up where they perform a surgery on the wrong person. As the anesthesiologist was hooking me up I was so afraid. I could feel the tears streaming from my eyes even as I was trying my best to act normally. I think my lip was shaking a little bit also. I remember her stroking my forehead and telling me everything was going to be alright and that I was in good hands. For some reason all my fears had returned, and as everything was about to go black, I wondered what would await me on the other side. Would I wake up with a massive brain injury? Would I be handicapped? Would I never wake up? I woke up 4 hours later in the recovery room and I was feeling great. I was so happy to be alive and I could hardly believe that I barely felt a thing. I could even breathe through my nose, even though the surgery had been performed through the nose. My brain surgeon came in to check on me, and loopy as I said to him, "Hey man, great job." I offered him a fist bump and he laughed as he first awkwardly began for a handshake before transitioning to a fist. "You rock, man," I told him. He and the recovery nurse laughed it off as he headed off to his second brain surgery of the day. "What an awesome guy," I said to the nurse. "He sure is." She agreed, smiling. Not saying anything negative about the other surgeons, but him, he is something special. He always makes such an effort and takes such good care of his patients. Wow, I thought. A brain surgeon and a good person. What a guy. I had none of the expected negative side effects from my surgery and only needed to stay in the hospital for 5 days total. I recovered relatively quickly and was back to work only 3 weeks after my surgery. I could have taken more time off, but I actually really love my job and couldn't wait to be back. As the weeks went by I couldn't help but feel how strange it was that this chapter was actually over. After all the fear and anxiety, it was so weird to have made it out without any ill effects. Like a beached fish ready to die, only to be picked up and tossed back into the water. Life just resumed normally as if nothing happened. It's now been a year since I first started noticing the problems with my vision that started all this. I still have some lingering issues with my vision, but after all that has happened, I don't really care. It's just a little annoying, it doesn't preclude me from working or doing other things. I will take it. In some ways I feel now like I was a bit of a drama queen about all this. I am in a Reddit thread for people with brain tumors. There I sometimes see stories from people who really did get handed a death sentence. That really puts things into perspective. A pituitary gland tumor is probably the easiest type of brain tumor to remove. It can barely be called a brain tumor since it is in the pituitary gland that is attached to the underside of the brain but not part of the brain itself. Sometimes I think about what if I met someone who got a real brain tumor. Would they judge me for having it easy? Probably not, I guess. In any case, looking back, 2024 was still sort of a rough year. Even with the enormous relief after the surgery and the incredible eventual outcome. I've realized I'm still recovering from everything mentally. There has been some extra strain on my family, just from all the added stress on top of everything else. But I can feel it's getting better. Sometimes I remember moments from the time before I had the surgery. Moments when I hoped I would get at least 5 to 10 more years to live. And especially the moment when I was laying on the operating table with tears running from my eyes as the anesthesiologist caressed my forehead, telling me softly that everything would be alright. I think 2025 is going to be a good year. I think everything is going to be alright. Relevant comments. OP explains about today's technology and how it has helped with the surgery. OP. Well, what I can tell you is, it is not as bad as it sounds. The technology these guys now have has progressed so much in the last few years. My surgeon actually had FPV glasses while performing the surgery so he could see the tumor in 3D. They also have some new type of dissolving gauze that enabled me to breathe through my nose immediately after surgery. My nose was barely even sore when I woke up. Will OP have a full recovery or may have further issues after surgery and recovery? OP. Thank you. Yes, supposedly I should have no life-threatening issues due to this later in life. When they did a follow-up scan 6 months later, there was absolutely nothing left from the tumor. Which is rare from such a large tumor, and my surgeon had prepared me that there probably would be some traces left. OP provides details on when he knew he had to make appointments to get his eyes checked. OP. There were blind splotches in my field of view. Mine were near the middle of my field of view, but usually this type of tumor would affect the peripheral vision first and then move gradually inward. The splotches were consistent, so I didn't have good and bad days, they were always there. OP explains about his experiences with the doctors and when he needed them to take his concerns seriously. OP. My first eye doctor kind of shrugged it off as she didn't find anything wrong with my eyes themselves. She sent me away with a recommendation to buy some eye drops. My second eye doctor realized straight away that something strange was going on and ordered a CT scan. My wife has actually been having some vision issues for the past few years as well. She had also seen some eye doctors that couldn't find anything wrong. She ended up having an MRI and all they could find was some inflammation in the sinuses that might be interfering with the optic nerves. So I guess that is a thing. We are also in our early 40s. Has OP's vision improved significantly after the surgery? And if there are any other symptoms showing up? OP. Right after surgery my eyesight improved to about 90% of normal. But the last 2 to 3 months it has been regressing a little. It is nowhere near as bad as it was before the surgery, but it is at about 80% now and is no longer getting worse. I also sometimes get a bit of double vision, especially when looking into a person's face for some reason. My eye doctor told me that it could take as long as 2 years before eyesight is fully recovered, if it does ever fully recover. So I guess I will just wait and see. But even if it never recovers I won't complain. I wished for more years and my wish was fulfilled.